In the autumn of 1904, a municipal plumbing contractor named Raymond Chalk descended through a service access panel in the sub-basement of the Cincinnati City Hall, carrying a pipe wrench, a lantern on a leather strap, and a work order for a broken drain lateral that city maintenance had been unable to locate from above. The City Hall had been completed 14 years earlier in 1893, and its sub-basement was the lowest level anyone on the maintenance staff had ever worked in. Chalk had been in dozens of sub-basements across Cincinnati. He knew the smell of them: damp stone, old mortar, cast iron with a century of mineral deposit on it. What he smelled when the access panel came open was different. Cool, still, the kind of still that belongs to enclosed spaces that have not moved air in a very long time. He lowered his lantern through the opening and saw, below the building's documented sub-basement floor, a second floor, not a crawl space, a room. Full ceiling height, he estimated 8 feet from what he could see. Dressed stone walls. A corridor leading south in the direction of Plum Street. He descended. He followed the corridor for approximately 60 feet before it opened into a chamber that stopped him entirely. The chamber was not empty. It contained seating, stone benches cut into the walls on 3 sides, arranged in the configuration of a meeting room or a tribunal. The floor was swept clean, not cleaned recently, swept clean and left, as if whoever had last used the room had expected to return, and then had not. The official maintenance log for the Cincinnati City Hall in the autumn of 1904, held in the Cincinnati City Archives at the Public Library of Cincinnati and Hamilton County, contains no record of a work order for a broken drain lateral in the sub-basement. It contains no record of Raymond Chalk performing any work in the building that season. The building's service contractor ledger for 1904, which the archives holds under a separate municipal contract succession, lists Chalk's firm, Chalk and Sons Plumbing, established 1891, on 2 other City Hall jobs that year, in January and in July. The autumn job, the one for the broken drain lateral, does not appear. What does appear in the contractor ledger for October of 1904 is a line item for masonry work. A company called Bremer and Hoyt engaged for 2 days to perform what the ledger describes as sub-basement access consolidation. Chalk was not a mason. Bremer and Hoyt were not plumbers. 2 days of masonry work in a sub-basement in October 1904, billed to the city and documented in the ledger without any description of what access was consolidated or why. The access panel Chalk descended through does not appear in any current City Hall building plan. The room below it is not on any floor plan. The corridor is not on any floor plan. The chamber with the stone benches has never been described in any official document in the 122 years since the building was completed. Chalk was not a man given to exaggeration. He was a licensed plumbing contractor who had operated his own firm for 13 years, had worked on municipal contracts in Cincinnati since 1895, and whose professional reputation depended on the reliability of his assessments and the accuracy of his reports. He was 51 years old in 1904. He had been inside more Cincinnati buildings, above and below the ground, than almost anyone in the city's maintenance trade. He filed no report about what he found. He submitted no written account to the city. He told one person, his foreman, a man named August Fry, and swore him to silence the same day. Fry kept that silence for 38 years. In 1942, dying of a heart condition in a Cincinnati hospital, he told his son what Chalk had told him. His son, a schoolteacher named Harold Fry, wrote it down that night in a composition notebook. That notebook is held in the collection of the Cincinnati Historical Society, donated by Harold Fry's widow in 1979 under a family papers accession. The accession catalog describes its contents as personal diaries and correspondence. 1938, 1972. The 1942 entry describing Chalk's account is on page 14. It has not been cited in any published history of the Cincinnati City Hall, any published survey of the building's architecture, or any publicly accessible account of the building's infrastructure. Before we go further, if you find these buried investigations as fascinating as I do, hit subscribe so the next one finds you when it drops. The algorithm tends to suppress this kind of research unless you tell it otherwise. To understand what Raymond Chalk found below the Cincinnati City Hall, we have to go back, not just to the building's construction in the early 1890s, and not just to the architects who designed it. We have to go back to a question that the official histories of civic architecture in North America have never asked out loud: why the great city halls, courthouses, and municipal buildings of the 1870-1900 construction period were built with sub-basement levels that do not appear in their publicly filed architectural plans, and whose access points were systematically sealed within a decade of the building's completion. The official history of American civic architecture presents the buildings of this period as straightforward exercises in institutional ambition, cities expressing their prosperity and permanence through monumental public structures. That is accurate, as far as it describes the building's facades, their lobbies, their council chambers, and courtrooms. What it does not account for is the subsurface. The great city halls of this period, Cincinnati, Philadelphia, Baltimore, St. Louis, Milwaukee, San Francisco, were built on foundations that their own construction records describe, in the few cases where those records are specific, as extending significantly deeper than any structural requirement of the building above would demand. A load-bearing foundation for a masonry building of 6 or 8 stories requires in most soil conditions a foundation depth of 10 to 15 feet. The documented foundation depths of these buildings range from 22 to 37 feet. The difference, the extra 12 to 20 feet of excavation and masonry, is not accounted for in any official construction rationale. It is not attributed to soil conditions, to seismic precaution, or to any documented engineering specification. It is simply there. A civil engineer named George Taft, who worked for the Philadelphia Department of Public Property from 1888 to 1916, was assigned in 1903 to produce an as-built survey of Philadelphia's City Hall, the massive structure on Penn Square that had been under construction since 1871 and was finally nearing completion after 32 years of work. His assignment was to produce accurate floor plans of every level of the building for the department's permanent records. He was a methodical, experienced man. He had been with the department for 15 years. He had produced as-built surveys on 9 other major civic buildings in Philadelphia without incident. He worked for 11 months on the City Hall survey. He produced plans for every documented floor, from the tower summit to the sub-basement. In January of 1905, he submitted his completed survey to the department, along with a covering memorandum. The memorandum, which is held in the Philadelphia City Archives under the Department of Public Property Records, states that his survey is complete, with the exception of one level, a level below the documented sub-basement that he encountered during the survey but was unable to fully map, because 2 of the 4 access points to that level had been sealed with concrete fill at some point after the building's construction, and the remaining 2 access points were secured with locks whose keys were not held by any Department of Public Property staff member he was able to identify. He requested that the department locate the keys or arrange for a locksmith so that he could complete his survey. The department's written response, which is also in the city archives, instructs Taft to mark the level as inaccessible in his survey and to submit the plans as completed without it. The floor plans Taft submitted are the official record of the building. The inaccessible level is not on them. It is not on any floor plan of Philadelphia's City Hall that has ever been publicly filed or published. There is a growing body of independent research suggesting that the official construction histories of major North American civic buildings, particularly those built in the decades between 1865 and 1905, are systematically incomplete with respect to their subsurface levels. The pattern is consistent enough, and the documentation of suppression is specific enough that the incompleteness cannot be attributed to record loss or bureaucratic oversight. The sublevels were built. They were accessed during the construction period, and then, at some point in the decade or two following each building's completion, the access points were sealed. Not as part of any documented structural modification, not as part of any recorded maintenance decision, but quietly, in the kind of line-item transaction that appears in a contractor ledger as a generic description and then disappears into the archive without any official explanation. Baltimore, 1896. A drainage crew working beneath the old City Hall on Holiday Street broke through the floor of the building's documented basement and encountered a stone-lined room approximately 20 feet below the street. The crew foreman's field log, held in the Baltimore City Archives under a public works maintenance accession, describes the room as containing iron fixtures of an unidentified type mounted on the walls at regular intervals. The foreman logged the discovery, requested guidance from his supervisor, and was instructed to backfill the opening with concrete that afternoon. The instruction is recorded in the supervisor's correspondence file. No engineer examined the room. No photograph was taken. The concrete was poured the same day. St. Louis, 1899, a contractor performing foundation waterproofing work on the old City Hall on Market Street, reported in a written estimate to the city engineer's office that the building's east foundation wall, at a depth of 28 feet, contained an opening, not a structural crack, but a formed opening with dressed stone edges, leading to a passage that extended beyond the range of his work lights. The city engineer's response was a change order authorizing the contractor to seal the opening as part of the waterproofing scope. The opening was sealed. The contractor's estimate and the change order are both in the St. Louis City Archives. The opening is described in the estimate as deliberately constructed. It was sealed without examination. San Francisco, 1902, a building inspector named Nathaniel Cross, conducting a routine structural assessment of the old City Hall on Larkin Street 2 years before the 1906 earthquake would destroy it, noted in his inspection report a discrepancy between the building's documented foundation depth and the depth his probe measurements indicated. His measurements suggested the foundation extended at least 9 feet deeper than the architectural plans on file showed. He flagged the discrepancy in the report and recommended a supplementary survey. The recommendation was not acted on. Cross's report is in the San Francisco Public Library's Historical Records collection. His measurement notes, which would have shown the specific probe readings, are not attached to the report. They are referenced in the report's index, but physically absent from the file. The 1906 earthquake and fire that destroyed the old City Hall are often cited as the reason so few records of that building survive. That explanation is convenient. It is also, in this case, incomplete, because Cross filed his 1902 report 4 years before the earthquake in a city records office that was not among the buildings destroyed. The report survived. The measurement notes attached to it did not. The earthquake destroyed many things. It did not selectively destroy the attachments to one building inspection report while leaving the report itself intact. Someone removed those notes before the earthquake, not after. This is not coincidence. This is a pattern. But here is what makes the Cincinnati case different from every other account of sealed sublevels beneath civic buildings. In 1953, 49 years after Raymond Chalk descended through that access panel, a steam pipe repair crew working in the City Hall's documented sub-basement broke through a section of the east wall, not intentionally, but as a result of vibration damage from the pipe repair work, and exposed an opening approximately 3 feet wide and 5 feet tall, filled with loose rubble fill rather than the solid concrete that had sealed the Baltimore and St. Louis openings. The crew supervisor, a city employee named Leonard Parks, cleared enough rubble by hand to see what was beyond it. He saw a corridor. He saw dressed stone walls. He saw, at the far end of what his lantern could reach, the edge of what appeared to be a room. He did not enter. He filed a written incident report with the Cincinnati Department of Public Works, describing exactly what he had found. That report is in the Cincinnati City Archives under a 1953 Public Works incident file. The archives catalog lists it. It is accessible to researchers. Parks's incident report was received by the department, logged, and assigned a follow-up reference number. The follow-up action recorded under that reference number is a work order issued 3 days later to a masonry contractor for emergency sub-basement structural repair on the City Hall east wall. The repair was completed in 2 days. The opening was resealed. Leonard Parks filed no second report. He retired from the city in 1961. His daughter, in an interview conducted by a local historian in 2004 for a Cincinnati neighborhood history project, said her father had spoken about what he found exactly once, when she was a teenager, and had told her 2 things: that the room at the end of the corridor had been used, and that whoever had sealed the opening had not done it to protect the building. They had done it to protect the room. The Cincinnati Department of Public Works has never adequately addressed several specific questions about the sublevel below its City Hall's documented basement. It has never explained why the October 1904 ledger entry for sub-basement access consolidation, 2 days of masonry work by a contractor not involved in any other aspect of building maintenance that year, does not correspond to any documented maintenance need or structural modification in the building's records. It is never explained why George Taft's 1905 survey of Philadelphia's City Hall was accepted as complete when Taft's own covering memorandum stated explicitly that one entire level of the building had not been surveyed. It is never explained why Leonard Parks's 1953 incident report, which the archives catalog lists as accessible, was followed within 72 hours by a resealing of the opening it described, without any structural examination, any photographic documentation, or any engineering assessment of what was behind the wall. Why did the Baltimore supervisor instruct a drainage crew to backfill a room containing unidentified iron fixtures on the same day it was discovered, before any engineer had examined it? Why does the San Francisco Building Inspection Report reference measurement notes that are missing from the file? Why, in city after city, when a worker breaks through into a sealed sublevel and files an honest report about what he found, does the institutional response arrive within days, not weeks, not after review, and seal the opening again? Why is the response always the same, and why is it always that fast? The honest answer is that we do not know for certain. What we have are a composition notebook in the Cincinnati Historical Society, a covering memorandum in the Philadelphia City Archives, a foreman's field log in Baltimore, a change order in St. Louis, a structural report with missing attachments in San Francisco, and a 1953 incident report that was acted on in 72 hours. and a pattern of institutional response in 6 cities across 50 years that, in every case, chose to seal rather than examine, to record rather than investigate, and to treat the sub-levels beneath civic buildings as something that needed to stay hidden rather than something that needed to be understood. For the 42 years between his discovery in 1904 and his death in 1946, Raymond Chalk continued to operate his plumbing firm in Cincinnati. He worked in the city's buildings above ground for the rest of his career. He never descended below a documented floor level again, according to the records of his firm. He told August Frey what he had found, swore him to silence, and then kept that silence absolutely for the rest of his life. The only reason we know anything about what he saw is that Frey broke the silence in a hospital bed in 1942 to a son who wrote it down that night in a composition notebook that a widow donated to an archive in 1979, where it sat uncatalogued for 3 years and uncited for 43 more. The chamber with the stone benches was swept clean when Chalk walked into it. The floor was clean. The benches were cut into the walls with precision. Someone had built that room to be used, and had left it in order, and had sealed it, or had it sealed by others, expecting, perhaps, that whoever sealed it would one day be gone, and that the room would still be there. It still is. The Cincinnati City Hall stands today on Plum Street, its Romanesque Revival facade unchanged since 1893. If you enter the building and descend to the lowest public level, you are standing on the floor of the documented sub-basement, the floor that Raymond Chalk stood on before he opened the access panel and went lower. The panel itself, if it was not permanently sealed in that 2 days of masonry work in October 1904, is somewhere in that floor. Below it, if the corridor was not filled end to end with concrete in 1904, is the room that Chalk measured and that no official plan has ever shown. And below the stone benches, if anything was ever stored beneath the swept floor, is whatever made whoever built that room decide at some point that it needed to be sealed from above and forgotten. The official history tells us that city halls were built as seats of government, open institutions of civic administration, designed for the public business of the public's representatives. What the contractor ledgers and the surveyor's memoranda and the drainage crew logs tell us is that the buildings that housed those institutions were built with levels that were never shown to the public, never surveyed for the record, and never allowed to remain open once someone stumbled into them, not because they were structurally dangerous, not because they were flood risks or fire hazards, because whatever was in them was worth sealing a wall in 72 hours to keep covered. These records survive because people refuse to stop looking. Subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it. History does not disappear when it is buried beneath a city hall. It disappears when no one files the second report. Next week, I am following a thread that connects the sealed sub-level in Cincinnati to a set of architectural drawings produced in 1887 by the firm of Samuel Hannaford & Sons, the firm that designed the Cincinnati City Hall, that are held in the Avery Architectural and Fine Arts Library at Columbia University. The library's finding aid lists one set of drawings for the Cincinnati City Hall. When a researcher requested the drawings in 2016, the box contained plans for every floor of the building except one. The missing set is for the level Hannaford's firm labeled in the finding aid's own index as level B2. The finding aid describes level B2 as the sub-basement. There is only one sub-basement in the building's official record, but Hannaford drew 2.